I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We continue with the Gospels again. Christ is still in the Galilean area. He's up in Capernaum primarily. That's where he's kind of based out of. We read a lot of his miracles, a lot of his healing, a lot of discourses. The bread. He is the bread of life. To eat with unwashen hands does not defile a man. All those good things. Lastly, we read the story of the healing of the woman of Canaan. Now this happened in the coasts of Tyre and Sidon, which would have been closer to the Mediterranean. But he has also returned to Capernaum, where he did a few more miracles, and that's where we left it. So now we're going to read this story, which is in only Matthew and Mark. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. Matthew chapter 15, verses 32 through 39. Then Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days, and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. And his disciples say unto him, Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness, as to fill so great a multitude? And Jesus saith unto them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fishes. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to the disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. And he sent away the multitude, and took ship, and came into the coasts of Magdala. So remember, after he heals the woman of Canaan, he comes back to Capernaum, back into Galilee, and the people all come around him, bringing him the sick and afflicted, and he's been healing them, he's been teaching them. It's now, as it says here, it's been 3 days. They've been with him in the wilderness for 3 days. Now, they may have brought food with them initially, but most of them do not have enough food with them, at least. And so we get the second miracle, feeding the 4,000. This is the second time Christ has done this. Now, the first time might be considered somewhat more grand of a miracle, because the first time he fed 5,000 with only 5 loaves and 2 fish. This time he is feeding 4,000, so it's less people, and he has 7 loaves and a few fish, meaning probably more than 2. So he has more food and less people to feed. Still a miracle, still wonderful. And again, this is recorded only in Matthew and Mark, just like the healing of the woman of Canaan. This whole story, this whole episode here, or this whole narrative, starting with him going down into Tyre and Sidon, healing the woman of Canaan, returning into Galilee, teaching the people for 3 days, and now feeding the 4,000. It's all only contained in Mark and Matthew. Now there's not much else to say here. It's really just kind of repeating the previous miracle. So let us look at the Joseph Smith translation. Now there's not much here. In verse 32, we just remove unto him, so it's, and he called his disciples and said. In verse 36, instead of break them, it's and break the bread. In verse 37, we remove that was left. So now it reads, they took up of the broken meat 7 baskets full. And then in 39, the coasts is made singular, just coast. Nothing earth-shattering there, nothing real deep, just simplifying things a little bit. Let us read this same story in Mark. Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 9. In those days the multitude being very great, and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples unto him, and saith unto them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now been with me 3 days, and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for divers of them came from far. And his disciple answered him, From whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? And he asked them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7. And he commanded the people to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves, and gave thanks, and brake, and gave to the disciples to set before them. And they did set them before the people. And they had a few small fishes, and he blessed and commanded to set them also before them. So they did eat and were filled, and they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets. And they that had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. In Mark here, we are told that the disciples kind of objected to the whole plan. How are we going to get enough food? Just like when they fed the 5,000. How do we get enough food to feed these people? And I do like this. In Mark, it kind of comes in 2 stages. So he blesses and breaks the bread, and then after he has given the bread out, they realize, oh, we also got these fish here. So then he says another blessing and divides the fish as well. I like that. It gives a little bit more, I don't know if I want to say humanity or reality to it, but it sounds like something that could have happened at least. I don't know. It makes the story more fun. Let us look at the Joseph Smith translation here. In verse 1, it now says, Jesus called his disciples and said unto them, nothing much. In verse 3, the word far is now afar. In verse 4, instead of whence can a man satisfy these men with bread, it now reads, whence can a man satisfy these so great a multitude with bread? And in verse 6, it is instead of his disciples to set before them, it is to set before the people. In verse 7, we have a few here that now reads, and they had a few small fishes, and he blessed them, and commanded to set them also before the people, that they should eat. Then in verse 8, instead of broken meat, it is broken bread. But that's it for the Joseph Smith translation in Mark. Now there was one note I forgot to make about Matthew. Matthew says at the end that they left to go into Magdala. Magdala is the hometown of Mary Magdalene. That's what Magdalene means from Magdala. Now Magdala is an area, it's a town on the west coast of Galilee, south of Capernaum. So that's where they're going. They're leaving the Capernaum area, coming south to Magdala, at least according to Matthew. Now, we're going to leave that here, and we have another combined video in the 3 synoptic gospels next, so I will see you there.